All right. You cannot read the news today without asking yourself, is the president of the United States really corrupt? Is he compromised? Does he really have America's best interest at heart? Or is he just trying to fill the bank accounts of Biden family members? To help me answer those questions today, I have Alex Marlow from Breitbart News, but he's also put out a book called Breaking Biden through Simon and Schuster that I think has the receipts and the stories and the evidence that we're looking for. Alex, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Stephen, it's great to be with you. Congrats on all your success, and thanks so much for the interest in Breaking Biden.
Yeah. So the first question that I have is, I see in the news a lot, the Biden crime family. Can you help my viewers understand, why is that a legitimate title for Biden and his family? Or is that just one of these clickbait titles to get people interested to read the news?
Yeah, they are crime family, and the extent to which we're doing a little bit of pro wrestling, WWE stuff with the headlines to get people's attention. I openly admit we do that at Breitbart sometimes. But if you read the text, and if you look at the book Breaking Biden, which is 1,600 endnotes, there's no horsing around. It's all dead serious stuff. I mean, it's fun. I think you'll and hopefully you agree, Stephen, it's a good read, and I think you'll enjoy yourself. But I do try to bring all the receipts that I can, and that's the mandate that my staff has. And I'll give you a couple examples of known crimes that the Biden family has pulled off. The first one is the Burisma one, which is one that you don't need me to shed much new light on. Perhaps I can distill it down to something a little more simple than some in conservative media have made it seem. Some people have made it seem more complicated than it is. But Hunter Biden took a job with a Ukrainian energy company for $1 million a year, and he knew nothing about Ukraine or energy, as far as we can know. So that's very odd. No one has ever asked Hunter what he's done for this company. That should be the first question he gets when he eventually gets subpoenaed by these various committees that are finally, it seems like, unearthing some of the remaining details. The U.S.'s policy was that there was a prosecutor that was looking into Burisma in Ukraine that was doing a perfectly fine job. The State Department confirmed this. They thought the prosecutor was doing a good job. So Joe Biden, who is vice president, got word, clearly via Hunter, that Burisma wanted the prosecutor dealt with, presumably fired, but if not, at least told to stand down. So Joe Biden threatened the country of Ukraine, that he would withhold $1 billion if they didn't fire the prosecutor. So that is a material change of U.S. policy that goes directly against Barack Obama and Joe Biden's own State Department. And Hunter got a bag of cash in the process. And it appears as though this was a condition for a bag of cash. This is clearly bribery. It's clearly a crime, and you should get the handcuffs out. So this is one example from 7 or 8 years ago, and it's well known. And if we had a responsible Department of Justice, then they would have held the Bidens accountable for this, but we don't. So it's not the Department of Justice, part of the deep state, incredibly distracted, and clearly part of Team Biden now that Biden's in. So that's crime number one. Crime number two is Hunter Biden's gun charge, which we know is a clear crime. It's all documented in Breaking Biden. And Hunter intended to plead guilty, but then he realized he was going to get kind of labeled a felon, which he would have been. And I think he decided he's going to take his chances on the legal system. So he was within an inch of actually declaring, yes, I am a felon. And that one wouldn't have stuck to Joe Biden as much. It is, Stephen, which is kind of amusing, the one crime that has nothing to do with Joe, but it is a crime. It's very clear. So we know that there are crimes that are out there that are well known. So then you look at the fact, and I document at least a half a dozen countries in Breaking Biden where the Biden family is doing deals. And in almost all of these instances, you see favorable policy from Joe Biden. Now, I don't have subpoena power. I'm just a little bit bigger than you, Stephen, but not by much. I'm in my home office. I had a team of 5 part-time investigators help me on the book. I don't have subpoena power. I don't have a big staff and a big congressional office and several friends in Congress going through stuff for me. And I was able to track down probably north of 20 international deals, and all of them involve different policies being favorable from either Vice President or President Biden. I did a write-up of one just earlier this week of Frank Biden, who had gotten a deal in Costa Rica with taxpayer guaranteed funded loans to build real estate, particularly a country club. There's no evidence Frank Biden knows anything about building a country club. There's no evidence at all he should be doing that. And we know that taxpayer money goes into it. Joe Biden single-handedly singled out as vice president that he was going to prioritize commerce in Costa Rica. He also put a big emphasis on sustainable energy, and the sustainable energy specifically in Costa Rica. Frank Biden started a sustainable energy company in Costa Rica. There's clearly bribery that's going on, and the governments were all in on it. The government, as I have the quotes all backed up, say flat out, we were excited to work with the Biden family. Not just Joe Biden, the Biden family. They knew that the access to the vice president, who is now the president, would mean that there would be some cash flowing. And this is how the Bidens have always operated. And you can look at Iraq, you can look at Ukraine, you can look at China over and over. So many countries where the Biden family figured out a way to get money while policy got favorable towards those regions. So are they a crime family? Absolutely. The extent to which they're mobbed up is also another curiosity, where I tracked down mob connections to Joe Biden's first Senate race, mob connections to Frank Biden's startup charter school business that he started in Florida, which it went belly up, and only about 10% of the students in these charter schools were actually competing at grade level. But Frank was flying around on private planes, and there was a mob boss who benefited during that transaction. So yeah, I think it's pretty crystal clear. We need some more, I think, legal proceedings to really cement that. But hopefully the book is the catalyst that gets people in Washington fired up to get those answers. I know that was a long answer, but it's such a huge question. It's one of the most important things I tackled in the book.
Yeah, no, that's exactly, I mean, I didn't have any preconceived notion of what you were going to say, but that's what I wanted to know, right? Is like, where are the crimes? Where are the receipts, right? And it seems to me that the Biden family figured out, wait a minute, there's this river of taxpayer money flowing every day into Washington, D.C. And like a farmer, if we just kind of dig a little canal off, our family can have just a little bit of taxpayer money flowing into our pockets for the next generation and really enrich the Biden family. So the now
and you've nailed it. And one of the things that we on the right, and this is where as editor of Breitbart, I've never been afraid to be critical of my own side, even though I'm a conservative and I'm a card-carrying member of the conservative movement. I do think we made some things unnecessarily complicated. And you know how I described the Burisma incident? It's 3-4 sentences. You can get the whole thing down, and it should convince everyone who's at all open-minded. And I try to do some of the more complicated parts of the Biden's business deals, particularly 5 deals that they cut with the Chinese that were all backed by the Chinese government. When I summarize them with all the details, all the receipts, all the endnotes, but on each one, I try to put a 1 or 2 sentence summary at the end so that people get a sense of what's going on. Like, for example, there's one that I love to cite called the Dragon Head, where Hunter Biden sold a company called Rosemont Realty to a Hong Kong-based company called Gemini. Gemini is owned by Costco, which is a shipping conglomerate that is Chinese, and it's backed by the Chinese government. Xi Jinping called it the Dragon Head because of its strategic importance. And this is one that it sounds like, well, what a wild web, but you can just distill it to this. Hunter Biden sold his company to something called the Dragon Head for an unknown sum. It was at least 188 grand, but most importantly, he retained equity. And as far as I know, he's got equity to this day. He's got equity in a company that is connected to, there's now owned by a Chinese shipping conglomerate. That stuff is a big deal. And how are we supposed to take on China on the world stage if the president's family is getting a check essentially from Chinese shipping? So we need to get those answers. And no one's ever been asked these things, Stephen, which is just so mind-blowing to me that the Bidens have avoided that level of scrutiny. And that's just one of 5 examples just regarding China. Maybe there's a 6th one even.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Absolutely. That is crazy. I'm at the point in your book where you reveal why he would have brought Kamala Harris on, even though she's not qualified for the position. And maybe we can talk a little bit about that down the road. But Remember during Obama's time where there was someone made famous, Joe the plumber, right?
Yeah, of
You remember
course.
that guy?
Of
Okay.
course. Yeah,
So
there was a moment he was the most important American for felt like
yes,
about 10 minutes.
yeah, unfortunately he passed away not long ago, but
Yes.
to make it really easy, going back to your Burisma example, 2 or 3 sentences. If you went to the average American, let's just say a plumber, and you said, hey, there's a plumber in Washington, D.C. that has no experience in plumbing, doesn't know how to fit pipes together, the purple glue, plumbing it so that it drains, doesn't know anything about that, just got a job for $80,000 a month, $20,000 a week, and it's related to a politician's child. Don't you think they'd go, wait a minute, there's nepotism, something's not right? How could this not plumber get a plumber job making $20,000 a week, right? The average American gets it. Why would Joe Biden's son, that knows nothing about energy, doesn't speak Ukrainian, get $1 million a year job to do nothing? They literally said he's an idiot that gets us
Yeah.
access to the big guy, right?
Yeah.
Like the average Americans
Exactly.
understand this.
Exactly. And that's just the Burisma example. And then you ask the same question. Why would a guy, James Biden, Joe's brother, who was a former nightclub owner, why would he get to negotiate a massive contract in Iraq that led to the building of 100,000 homes? And it was part of a $35 billion, 500,000 unit project. Like, why would he get that opportunity of all the people walking the planet? A guy who knows apparently nothing about building, nothing about negotiating, other than maybe a nightclub deal, and knows nothing about Iraq. Why would he get this job? These questions are so obvious, and yet the public, the establishment media, has zero interest in it. And sadly, it seems like most of the Republicans don't have a lot of interest in it.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, you've mentioned that for 50 years, Joe Biden has created this web of connections in Washington, D.C., different countries, foreign dignitaries, foreign businesses. Can you give us maybe an example? You started talking about China, where maybe Hunter saw an opportunity. Wait a minute, Dad has this connection to China. Maybe I can use the big guy's name and influence. I can do some hustle bait saying, oh, my dad's right next to me. If you disappoint him, we're going to ruin your career and everything about you. Those were the type of tactics that Hunter was using. What are some of the companies that because we have this Tony Bobolinsky who's willing to come forward and testify against him, against an energy company in China. I mean, what was going after energy contracts just like a slam dunk deal for the Biden family?
Yeah, I think they had, I think probably a lot of it is going to be really hard to pinpoint the exact conversations because of how cagey the Bidens have been and how dishonest they've been. Joe Biden makes lying a religion. And if you go back throughout his entire history, he lies and embellishes. And I don't even make it until the introduction before I'm already documenting dozens of lies that he's gone through. You have to understand he is a liar. Like it's not a pejorative. I'm not trying to insult him. It's just a tactic. He's a liar, and he always has been. He got caught plagiarizing 5 pages in a law review when he was in law school. He got busted, but was never disciplined. He got busted plagiarizing a guy named Kinnock from the UK and Robert Kennedy Sr. when he was on the campaign trail in 1988, caused him to lose his race. So he's a known liar. Him saying he drives an 18-wheeler, et cetera, is just small part of it. The crazy corn pop speech that we all love, that of course I document in the book, Who Could Resist, that's loaded with lies. It's just what he does. So you have to understand he's willing to lie all the time for any purpose, and he doesn't care, and he's never been held accountable for any of it. So the biggest lie he ever told is that he never talks about business with Hunter. Now, actually, my first book, Breaking the News, when I was researching that, I figured out that I looked at, I think it was a window of about 2 years or so, 3 years maybe, Hunter Biden had flown out of Joint Base Andrews, where Air Force Two is located, about 23 times. So he'd taken nearly 24 flights just in a small window. I couldn't go through paperwork all day, but I spent some time on it, and I counted 23 or so flights where Hunter was on the manifest. He's going to places like China, Ukraine, et cetera, where Joe Biden was the lead policy guy. So why is Hunter going with Joe to these places? There's only one reason Hunter would ever want to go to these places, and that's for business. This is not a vacation. He's going specifically to make money, and he's on the plane with Joe. Now, we have to take Joe the liar's word for it that they are never discussing finances. What else is there to discuss? They're incredibly fascinating and wildly complicated. If you think of the stuff that you talk about with your parents. Now, imagine you're flying on Air Force Two overseas with them, and they're doing diplomacy, cutting deals, and you're cutting business deals, and it just, we don't say a word. We don't talk about it. It's absurd, and only a total idiot would think that's what's going on. So when you think about how coordinated they were on all these deals, you cannot give them the benefit of the doubt. Now, I wasn't privy to a lot of these conversations, and there's no way to get that information unless Hunter and Joe want to come clean, what they discussed and how. There's just no way. It would be nice to ask Hunter and actually hear his explanation, but I can't call Hunter in front of a committee. If I was on one, I would. And I will tell you, if anyone does, I will be recommending a lot of questions that they should be asking, because I think I know the right questions to ask the guy. But we're not going to get a moment where Hunter and Joe are high-fiving, holding a big corkboard check with a massive amount of money on it. But we are going to get details like one of the ones that I reported on, and you can get a little snippet at Breitbart.com, where I look at our strategic oil reserves, where Joe Biden, when he tapped our oil reserves, ostensibly because, there was the Putin price hike, but it was really because we had massive inflation, partially because Joe wouldn't drill and tap our own energy resources. And gas prices are going so high, his polls are going down. So Joe taps the strategic reserves, which he probably shouldn't have done, tapped them multiple times. They're at a historic level in terms of a historic low right now, and we're not even in wartime. It's all very dangerous. But some of those oil reserves, Stephen, went to a Chinese company. Now, how on earth could a Chinese company, why would they get our oil reserves? Well, you look, and Hunter has business ties to that company. So that's the only logical explanation, in my view. And again, I'd like to ask everyone these questions. There's no explanation for why a Chinese company should get these reserves, and specifically a Chinese company that has ties to Hunter Biden. The coincidence is impossible. It's impossible. So we just have to use our brains. And our brains are, this is clearly the design of trying to use the government to get money into the hands of the Biden family. And again, one of a dozen examples, maybe 2 dozen. All of these, we act as though we've exhausted them. We've gone through them. We've thought about them enough. We haven't even begun to think about the complexity of these deals. And the Bidens cannot be trusted to give us their word that everything was hunky-dory and everything was above board. Nothing about this family has ever been above board from the very start.
Yeah, I remember covering this in one of my news shows where it was like, okay, they're going to tap into 100 million barrels in order to lower gas prices heading into the election. And oh, wait a minute, 5 to 10 million barrels going right to a Chinese energy company. And I remember people in my comments saying, why is he giving our emergency oil to China? Is he compromised by China? Like, it was my own, very normal, good, hardworking American commenters saying something is not right here. And you make a really good point, Alex, about being on Air Force Two and never talking. I mean, I drive with my mom in her CRV to Olive Garden, and we talk about business.
Of course.
It's insane to me. Now, really quickly, why would a former senator and vice president have an office and a garage full of confidential and top secret documents? I mean, isn't that illegal for anyone but the president of the United States to have those records?
Exactly. You're asking great questions. You're asking the questions the establishment media should be asking, which is, again, Stephen, why you've got so many subscribers. These are the questions journalists used to ask. They used to ask, why would Joe Biden have classified documents at all? That's question number one. Number two, why would he be storing them in a place where almost known felon Hunter, who is about to plead guilty to a felony, could get the classified documents, which he did? Why did he do these things? The next question is it legal for him to do these things? Of course it's not. But the media acts as though these are not a big deal. And they act as though what Donald Trump did, because Trump didn't immediately give his documents back to the National Archives. Act like what Trump did is worse because Trump was less cooperative when he got caught. Now, Joe was more cooperative, but what Joe did was far worse because he never even had the ability to declassify those documents as vice president. All the documents that Trump had, which Trump could have helped himself by, I think, behaving a little differently with those documents. So I'm not trying to, whitewash that. But there's no comparison in terms of what's worse. The Joe Biden documents are much, much worse because there's only one person who can declassify documents. That's the president. So obviously it's worse when the vice president, former vice president, has them. Now, the next question is, why would Joe want those documents? And the answer is obviously to make money. There's only two reasons to have those documents from my vantage point. Number one is for memoirs. And Joe loves to write memoirs. He's already written 2 of them. So, get a good book check for the vice president, bag some cash. Or the more nefarious one, which is to sell them. And to sell them to whom? And Joe wouldn't be doing the selling. They're far too sophisticated for that. They're much smarter than people think. But the rest of his family members all have international deals. Frank, Joe, Jim, all are international business people. And now they're going to have access to information and perhaps have hard copies of them. And this is the obvious point that any reasonable, don't even have to be a journalist, observant American would ask. And our media just treated it as though this is all not a big deal. And I categorize in the book, I go through the timeline. All the classified document stuff was all released too close to the midterm elections for it to make a difference. And a lot of the juiciest stuff that we learned about it came right after the midterm, where it would be as far away from as possible from any major election. It was all clearly coordinated to do the minimum level of damage for Joe Biden. It's another great example of something where we just blew through it way too fast. When you go back and revisit what's in those documents, why they were taken, and what the purpose was and what their use was. And all of this needs to be done publicly so that Joe and his family can explain what's the point of all this.
Yeah. I do think someone should explain to Biden, hey, maybe it's time to step down and let somebody more coherent run the country. After all, you can make $400,000 to $700,000 an hour giving speeches to Goldman Sachs or international communities. I mean, Hillary Clinton charges $400,000 for 1 hour. We just found out Michelle Obama, $700,000 for 1 hour. Why would you want all the stress of running a country, trying to beat Putin, trying to beat Hamas, when you could just give one lousy little lecture for $700,000? He's obviously not thinking straight.
Well, so here's your answer. The answer is Joe, his entire life, has been about being president. He wanted to be president since he was a little boy. He named one of his dogs president. He has thought about holding this office for as long as I could get records. And he revisited it throughout his life. But it goes beyond that. He didn't just want to be president. He wanted to have a dynasty like the Kennedys. Joe Biden lived for many years in a DuPont mansion. The DuPont family was by far the richest and most powerful family in Delaware. Honestly, one of the richest and most powerful families in the country's history. And he bought one of their mansion, $10,000. And I'm sorry, not $10,000, 10,000 square feet. So Joe Biden, who had a family never more than 5 people, had 10,000 square feet of a mansion with a ballroom in it. Joe portrays himself as a blue-collar guy. Why would a blue-collar guy need all that stuff? Because he was designing it to be a retreat for his entire operation, the same way Hyannisport is for the Kennedys. That was the whole goal. He ended up offloading the mansion eventually, but he did it to a guy from a bank that was a huge donor to Joe Biden, and it was purchased above market value. So Joe basically was cashing out, and he was getting paid off somehow, some back scratching to offload that place. So he's always wanted this dynasty. And I write about this in Breaking Biden, how he had fantasized about passing the reins to Beau Biden, who would then become president, and Hunter would be his most trusted advisor and speechwriter. Hunter Biden, the crackhead, and I'm not calling crackhead to be mean. I'm saying he is a crackhead, literally. He would be the #1 advisor to President Beau. And Beau had a pretty clean record. He was going to be president. There's no doubt about it. It would have worked. Joe's plan would have worked had Beau not gotten a brain tumor and died, because he would have cakewalked into the White House, would have 2 terms, would have rehabbed Hunter, would have set up the family dynasty for generations, and they would have been off and running, and Joe would have succeeded in all of his wildest dreams. So he's not sitting around thinking about 400 grand. He's sitting around thinking about, how do I get power for myself and for my family? And he's also notoriously bad with money. It's a family trait. I looked at every Biden, not a single one of them is any good with money. They've all wasted money. And most of them have at least had a brush with richness, with wealth, and they've almost all blown it. I look at Frank Biden, who 1 minute's on private planes, the next minute has a tax lien on him. Jim Biden, is in the nightclub business, then he's in the international real estate. His dad, Joe Biden Sr., was, taking the kids to a lifestyle of boats and horses and equestrian and dog racing and country clubs. And then all of a sudden they're living in the tenements of Delaware. It's an amazing story of people who keep getting money and keep wasting it. And Joe's no different. So his financial acumen, just take a look at the way he's run this country. There's no way to run it any worse fiscally than Joe's done it. It's impossible how bad he's been. All of this, of course, is documented in Breaking Biden as well. So, but you look at a guy who's notoriously bad with money, he's not thinking about that. He's thinking about clinging to power as long as he possibly can.
Yeah. Oh man, that's a great point. You mentioned on Twitter, now X. I hate that we have to say that. Just keep it Twitter. Anyway.
I know.
Yeah. You had mentioned,
I never even liked Twitter, but it's still, the branding is so iconic. Like, why would you change it?
Yeah. Anyway, he's his own animal. But you had mentioned on there that you have the stories or the reasoning why Joe Biden has purposefully weakened the U.S. southern border. That's a big concern for a lot of people that follow me. So could you just briefly touch on that?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, this is something, and thanks for addressing this, because this is one where it usually is the #1 issue on my mind is the border and immigration. I come from California, so we're ahead of the curve in a lot of ways. And one is by ruining our state with immigration, illegal immigration specifically. So we did that like 30 years ago, 40 years ago. And again, doesn't get discussed much because it's a single party state. So I've always been really tuned into this, and Breitbart kind of got on the map by reporting on some of the surges that were taking place at the border during the Obama years, and even forcing the establishment media to cover some of these photos of the literal cages that Obama built, not Trump, and, children in Mylar blankets to keep warm, facilities overrun. We had all this footage, and we were saying, hey, this is a humanitarian crisis here. This is not just about, Democrat voters and Republican wasting money. Like, it's not about that. We're encouraging people to risk life and limb, and we're creating this industry run by these cartels that their products are humans and drugs, and they're bringing the humans and the drugs up, and they're making illicit cash. And it's corrupting the entire world. The entire planet is seeing this gold rush, and we're getting weaker in the process. This is insane. Why are we doing this? And you realize that much of Washington likes an open border. And Joe Biden is the ultimate Washington establishment creature. So he helped create the establishment. There is no human being on earth who's had more opportunity to close the border or at least secure the border than Joe Biden. Over 30 years in the Senate, 8 years as vice president, and now 3 years as president. He's had the ability more than any other person to take this issue seriously, and he hasn't. So clearly it's intentional. So then the answer is why? Well, first of all, big business, which is now ostensibly an arm of the Democrat Party. Formerly, it was an arm of the Republican establishment, but now it's really more Democrat, and then also some Republican establishment. There's some overlap. They like big influx of illegal immigration. What that does is it creates a big consumer base, and it drives down wages for working class people. And now even moving into middle class people with visa overstays. So sort of white collar as well. But the more immigration we have, the less they have to pay their workers. That makes their stock go up. So their expenses go down. So big business loves an open border. Big business loves Joe Biden. I document that in great detail. Next, the Democrat Party. As people get older, they become conservative and they vote Republican. So the Democrat Party needs a new voter base because their Republican millennials have some children. Democrat millennials don't want to have kids as much. They're not interested in replacing their voters with new people that they can raise up. So they're having fewer children. And when they do have children, there's always a chance that they'll get lost to evil right-wing YouTube and online world, and they might get convinced that they become conservatives. So they got to figure out a way to get their voters. So they import them. And even though the illegal aliens aren't supposed to vote, though they now vote in local elections, their kids will vote. And they will vote typically for Democrats for a number of reasons. First of all, is the handouts, the big government, nanny state. But also, the Democrats are much more sophisticated in getting their ideas into the Spanish language. I'm very critical of Republicans in the book as well about this, that the Democrats are funding, and the Democrat establishment, the George Soroses, are buying up radio stations and broadcasting in Spanish. Now, at Breitbart, we publish some of our articles in Spanish, but not enough. I certainly don't simulcast anything I do in Spanish. Stephen, I don't know about you, but you're going to have to do it, man. You're going to have to start doing a Spanish language translation because we're missing all these new people who are voters or at least raising future voters. And we're ceding all that territory to Democrats. So they need the border open in a nutshell. And it doesn't matter what humanitarian strife happens. It doesn't matter if wages get driven down. And it's all a big conspiracy. It is a real conspiracy where the media is all in on it because they understand this. I wrote about this in Breaking the News, my first book. And so the fact of the matter is, both party establishments, the establishment media, they all get an open border serves their purposes. So it's only the sort of middle class, working class, normal Republican voters, conservative voters, the populist voters who have any interest in keeping the border secure. Those and a handful of places now where things have gotten way too out of hand. So you're starting to see some towns that are overrun. They'll say, okay, we've had enough. It's too much. But we are up against a monster. And the head of the monster, the head of the Hydra is Joe Biden. He is the one who has created this culture more than any individual person. So he should get most of the blame.
Yeah. Wow. Well, I do speak fluent Spanish, so I guess I'll have to start doing a show.
Got to do it. Double your work output.
All right. Final question. I really appreciate you taking time. I know how busy you are. At least 9 Biden family members have cashed in on the big guy, his name, his influence, his pay to play politics, where he tries to keep an arm's length distance so that he has plausible deniability. But a woman in California by the name of Elizabeth Neftali was anonymously spending significant amounts of money on Hunter's artwork until she was doxxed and made public by somebody. But during that time where she was anonymously buying the art, she received a dozen invitations to the White House to interact with the President of the United States. How is this not a pay-to-play scheme, getting somebody right into the White House for buying a presidential child's art?
You're very observant. The only 2 names we know are the Hunter Biden art buyers. And those of you who want more, I coincidentally, today as we're having this conversation, Stephen, I have a big piece on Hunter Biden's art grift and how he fooled the New York Times, and how he paints with literally a cocaine straw. He paints with a cocaine straw, and he uses alcohol-based paints. He's trolling all of us. It's all a big joke. And we all act like, well, maybe he's an artist. No, he's not an artist. He's fooling all of us. And he fooled the New York Times, who did this huge puff piece on him about how great of an artist and how he's making his debut in the art scene and how he's really gotten his act together. And in the piece, he's trolling the Times with all these drug and alcohol references. To me, he's making fun of them. And we all were just sort of taking it seriously. We were taking Hunter's art seriously. So the only 2 known donors are this person, Elizabeth Neftali, who is a major Biden donor and has been. So obviously, for whatever reason, a huge Biden supporter. I don't know what her personal interests are. Either she's a deeply committed Joe Biden fan, or she's got a personal agenda, or both. But that's one of the names. And the other name is a guy named Kevin Morris. Now, Kevin Morris is Hunter Biden's attorney. Kevin Morris also is a guy who is taking control of one of Hunter's LLCs that does major business in China. So am I saying Hunter is getting paid via his attorney who is laundering money from China? I'm not saying that, but I'm not saying that either. I don't know for sure. I don't have the bank records because I'm just a guy. I'm a journalist who's very observant, and I know where to look for stuff, but these need to be asked by a Congress, because maybe Kevin Morris just loves Hunter like a brother, and just, he's a rich guy and he wants to buy some of Hunter's art. That's perfectly plausible. What else is plausible is that Kevin Morris is doing international business, and through some means, probably legal means, to be honest, legal or illegal, both are a disgrace either way, because if the law allows for this stuff, that's almost worse. But probably through legal means is getting some money, and money's fungible, as we've been talking about nonstop for the last week, from some foreign entity, and that ends up going to Hunter's art. That's my theory. That's my belief that that's what's happening. But again, I can't back that up yet, but someone in Congress can. You can get the bank receipts and you can piece it together. So the art grift, again, we are just scratching the surface. And this is my last, you've been so generous, Stephen, to let me pitch the book so much. If there's one pitch in a nutshell for people, is you think you know the Bidens. I thought I knew the Bidens. I knew nothing about the Bidens. We know nothing about this family relative to what they're doing, the extent of their deals, the extent that Joe Biden's policies have failed our country, the extent that he is a bad guy in his character, which I've never said that about American president. I don't know if Obama's a bad guy. I don't agree with him on anything. He seems like a good dad. Like, I'm not sitting around obsessed with him being a bad guy. Joe Biden's a bad guy, and I bring the receipts on that too. He's a deadbeat grandpa. His brother had a hit and run accident where a guy died, and Joe helped Frank Biden avoid paying the guy's surviving daughters. Joe's wife and child were killed in a car crash over 30 years ago, I guess about 50 years ago. And Joe smeared the driver as a drunk. The guy was not a drunk. And Joe's wife was actually the one who was driving unsafely. She didn't deserve to die, obviously, but the driver had nothing to do with it. And Joe smeared him because he's a bad guy. We don't know these people yet. And he's going to win again unless we start taking seriously our obligation as citizens to get to know him.
Yeah. Wow. Wow. Well, people need to get the book. I appreciate you coming on, Alex Marlow from Breitbart News, with his new book out, Breaking Biden through Simon & Schuster. What's the best place for people to go to follow you, number one, and then number two,
thank you,
in order to get a copy of this incredible book?
Thank you. Amazing. So anywhere you buy books is good. I'm fine with Amazon. Barnes and Noble's no better. If you can go to an independent bookstore, that's great. But you know how it works with these conservative books, their book buyers don't buy as many of the books. So, most of the sales go through Amazon. So I can live with that. I don't love Amazon, but I'm fine with it in this environment. I will sign a book for you if you go to Premier Collectibles. So if you want my signature, that's great. And then other than that, it's really just spreading the word. Call a bookstore and ask them to carry it. It's going to be one of probably the best-selling Biden biography of all time. I would love to one day say it's even bigger than his memoirs. But it's probably going to be the most popular Biden book ever. And most people will not know about it. You'll have to be a consumer of independent media or conservative media. And Stephen, it's on the New York Times bestseller list. It's a New York Times bestseller, and the establishment media is still going to ignore it because they don't want this stuff to be in the conversation. So we have to force the issue. And I'm a citizen journalist at heart. And Breitbart, thank God, is an institution now. But when I started at Breitbart, I was the first employee. I was working in Andrew Breitbart's basement. It was just me, Andrew, and Larry, his lifelong best friend, who's our CEO. It was just the three of us. That was day one of Breitbart News. And then we eventually sort of took over the world. And it's an amazing thing what we can do as a grassroots if we care about something. So I hope people ride for the cause, which is we need to get the word out about this family before they beat us again. So a long answer, but Amazon's good enough. Premier Collectibles if you want a signed book.
Great. Thank you so much. I will put that link down below. And thank you again for taking time out of your day to come share this information with my audience.
Such a blast. I'd love to do it again with you. You ask great questions.
Great. Thank you. Bye-bye.